32 years after the Population Registration Act that categorized South Africans into racial blocks was repealed, the South African government is once more trying to pry open the door to enforced racial classification. I'm Martin van Staden. Join me as I explain why. The National Identification and Registration Bill is currently in draft form with the Department of Home Affairs and might soon make its way to Parliament. While the bill innocuously presents itself as nothing more than an update to existing identification laws in South Africa, something far more nefarious might be lurking under the surface. Since 1998, as many of you will know, when the Employment Equity Act was adopted, the South African government has in various forms required South Africans to self-classify their racial identity. This has been used in affirmative action in companies and for empowerment schemes when it comes to shares. This was always going to present a dilemma to the government because in theory, companies and individuals can classify themselves as they wish. There is no legal basis in South Africa for the government to say that a person is white, black, colored, or Indian, and must rely on people's racial perceptions of themselves. But with the recent adoption of laws like the Employment Equity Amendment Act and newly proposed water use regulations, it is clear that this government is interested in doubling down on its racial regimentation of South African society. And to do so effectively, or at least as effectively as an incompetent state can, it would need sounder legal footing. The National Identification and Registration Bill represents the thin edge of the wedge of this phenomenon. And we can see that thanks perhaps to a mistake made by one of the bill's drafters. In the bill, the term demographic information is defined to include a person's race, amongst other things like their age and gender. But despite being defined, the term demographic information does not appear anywhere in the bill itself. So some might hear this and think, well, no harm, no foul. Even though race is included as an item of demographic information, the government clearly doesn't intend to record race, since the bill nowhere allows demographic information to be recorded. Not so fast. With the inclusion of this definition, read with other provisions that give the Minister of Home Affairs wide powers to make regulations for the effective implementation of this new law, it is highly likely that gradually, through ministerial regulations, the attachment of a racial identity to each individual South African will in time be operationalized. A regulation will simply have to provide that demographic information has the meaning it is assigned in the Act. To us at the Free Market Foundation, then, it seems quite clear that this bill shows quite clearly that government has in mind a new population register that divides South Africans neatly into racial categories. This is something we believe South Africa should have left behind in 1991, when the old Population Registration Act was repealed. After all, in 1994 and 1996, the interim and current constitutions, which have the status of supreme law, provided that South Africa would be a non-racial state. We condemn this bill as the first step towards enforced racial classification. But that is not the only problem. The bill represents a significant centralization of information. It requires that the Department of Home Affairs set up a database of all South Africans, which will include some of our most intimate and personal information. This is a dangerous manifestation of what is called concentration risk. Imagine how valuable this database will be to criminal groups or even to corrupt government officials who have ulterior motives. Every few weeks, some bank or company has its client list compromised. Imagine this at the scale of 60 million odd South Africans. Suffice it to say, we at the Free Market Foundation do not believe that the government has the competence to keep this database safe. The National Identification and Registration Bill is a bad idea in a raft of bad ideas from this government. South Africans are already getting used to the bad consequences of these bad ideas. Join us in saying no to racial classification and to government-owned databases of free individuals. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Please remember to like this video if you've enjoyed the content. Click subscribe if you want to see more. And remember, all of our information and news is on our website at www.freemarketfoundation.com. Thank you very much for joining me. Stay free.